Well, welcome back to another episode of the 2 to 20 podcast, where we empower women how to build, fund, and scale their businesses. I'm really excited to have Jess Schultz, CEO of Amplify Group, with us today. Welcome, Jess.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Jess, I think you've been one of my favorite people that I've met, probably in the last 6 months of running my company. I love your content. I love your background too, that you've been sort of both an operator, you've been a funder, you've been a founder. I feel like you really can speak to a lot of sides of the business. So I'm really excited to kind of dive into how you navigate back and forth, and then how you're using that to power your business today.
Cool. Can't wait. And thank you.
One of the kind of to that initial topic point was around navigating career shifts. So I wonder how you can kind of maybe give us a little bit of background as to how you went from banking to tech to VC to founder. Are there different skills that you needed for each of those roles? How have you thought about the shift? Was it just a natural kind of conclusion to move into kind of new roles? I'd love to maybe start there.
Yeah, I actually love this question. So I'm a finance major. I was raised by two accountants, and so I went into finance because that just seemed like a natural thing to do. And I think probably like most people know, I don't think maybe it's gotten better. It's been so long, not to date myself, since I graduated, but there wasn't a lot of great career counseling available when I was in college. So it was just okay, I'm a finance major. I guess I'll go work at a bank. So I will say that first, going to work at a bank, I wouldn't say there was a ton of thought that went into it. I really don't think I knew the breadth of opportunities that were even available within finance. A bank just seemed like the default thing you do. So I got kind of lucky, I think, in that I landed, my first banking role was at Deutsche Bank in London. I got a lot of really great experience there. It's 2009, so it was a turbulent time. And I was working in over-the-counter derivatives at the time. And thankfully, I worked for a boss that was, helpful in those early stages of my career. And he's like, everything's moving electronic, everything's moving to an exchange traded product. I think that you should, follow the trends and try to get your next finance job in exchange traded derivatives. And so I kind of took that advice and ran with it. And I went and got a job at Merrill in futures. And that is obviously a listed derivative. So really just doubled down on that. But again, there wasn't a lot of thought in those early stages. It was just kind of following a mentor and not knowing a ton. After about 8 years in finance, to be honest, I had a great career in finance. I learned a ton. I just didn't feel the passion for working in banking, if I'm honest. And then at that point, you're sitting there with a series. Well, for me, I was sitting there with a Series 7 and almost a decade of experience. And I'm like, what the hell do I do with this? Where do I go next? And so my thought was, again, everything was moving more and more electronic. So I was like, I'm going to try to go get a job in tech sales for a tech company that sells to banks. Because I was like, then at least I can leverage all this experience. I know the buyer. I was the buyer. I understand the industry, and at least that will let me get more technology experience, technology sales experience. And I always anticipated that job would be my sidestep out of banking. So I think sometimes you do have to just find where can you take a sidestep to step completely out. So I did tech sales for trading software, essentially, for a little over a year. And I will say that was a great experience too, because trading software is so technical and you have to know so much about, you know this probably too, API, APIs and data centers and co-location, and it's crazy. But yeah, my intention was always to use that as a stepping stone. So then I went into a completely different sales role, selling HR software of all things. And that was a really big leap. But the more I learned about, that sale, there was a ton of green grass, and it was a value prop as far as what we were selling. like HR is something that everyone needs to have. It's not a nice to have. And so I
Yeah.
connected with that from like a seller perspective. I was like, I want to be selling something that is a painkiller, not a vitamin, right? Kind of thing, to use like the VC lingo. Um, and and again, it seemed like there was a lot of opportunity. The value prop made sense. And I liked that that was going to be focused on my role then was a company called TriNet, was venture capital and private equity channel sales. And I didn't know a lot about private equity or venture capital at that time because all of my prior finance experience had been with hedge funds and asset managers and like a totally different personnel or profile of finance. But I was really intrigued by it. And I think a lot, that's probably why you're a founder now, right? Like the more people learn about startups and tech and innovation, and like it's addicting for a lot of us. So the more I learned about that, the more I fell in love with it. And it was when I was really just trying to be more effective at my sales role at TriNet. And I thought, okay, HR is not the sexiest thing to talk about. People don't want to talk to me about like payroll and HR. Again, they just need it, but they don't really,
Yeah.
it's not exciting to talk about. So I was like, how can I come up with other ways to create touch points with people and to add value that are related to what I'm doing, but are sexier, more fun to talk about. So if you think, so I was trying to come up with creative ways, and I was like, all right, if I know that when a company gets funding from a VC, the next natural thing they're almost going to do is go try to spend that money, and a bulk of that money is usually on hiring people, and that's related to HR. So I started making that part of my talk track with founders. Was like, hey, I know you're probably a part of your growth strategy is to raise venture capital. After you raise venture capital, you're going to need to hire. That's where I come in. So it's just natural for me to build relationships with VCs, and perhaps I can be a conduit for you because I do have relationships with a lot of venture funds. If you are fundraising, let me know, send me your deck, and I can help broker introductions for you and get you meetings. And I was like, and then in my mind, I was like, well, if I help this founder get capital, then they're probably going to be more likely to spend their capital with me. So I just started becoming like a deal flow matchmaker to help me with sales, not really with like some, I don't know, like big grand master plan. But I paid a lot of attention to what these investors were looking for because I really wanted to be thoughtful about those companies that I was surfacing to them. I didn't want to just send them, spray and pray kind of thing. I wanted to be thoughtful about it. And that got their attention. Like they were all like, damn, Jess, you're sending me really good deals that I'm not seeing anywhere else. And, these are actually a really good fit for our thesis. And like, this is kind of crazy. You're pretty good at this. And so that's what got me the opportunity to be an investor, really, was just me, trying to be a good salesperson. And I remember when the VC recruited me, actually, I had the question for them even. I was like, what do you want with me? Like, I'm a futures trading turned salesperson. Like, I don't know what you want with me. And he's like, no, VC is all sales. And he's like, you're amazing at building relationships. You're good at thinking on your feet. You're good at like creative thinking. And he's like, and that's VC. And once I got into it, I actually absolutely agree with him. It's VC is 100% sales. And candidly for me, like, even though that was a great experience to be an investor and I learned a ton, I love to get my hands dirty and roll my sleeves up. And I just felt too far removed from the success of those companies as an investor, right? And you're supposed to be, it's not like you want your investor all up in your business all the time. So I personally just wanted to find a way to help these founders that felt more ingrained in the day to day. And I felt like that's how I could add value. And that's really why I started my company, was just to be more in the mud with them.
You kind of answered what I was going to say. My second question was, which was like, is there a personality type or like skills? And if you were talking to somebody just coming out of college, maybe they're still in college or, looking for summer internships, or maybe they're thinking of their first job out of college, they're interested in working in VC. I guess the first part of the question I was going to ask was like around like personality type, or like what should they be studying? I guess maybe also like prior to going into VC, do you recommend that if that's what people are interested in going into, do you recommend that they go and like work in a specific type of business. Maybe they go into banking or consulting. I know that's kind of a typical track, but I just wonder around like, the track going into VC, if you found like a certain kind of type of skill or trait to focus on.
Yeah. So I always give people the advice. I think you can go one of two ways, really. You can either become like, you can go vertical or you can go horizontal. And what I mean by that is either you decide to become like a subject matter expert within a certain industry, like you just double down and you are the expert within healthcare. And like even better if you can become like the expert within healthcare within B2B2C or something that like becomes so specific. So I've seen a lot of people break into VC where they just become super, super ingrained in that industry and they know it top to bottom. But I also think you can break into VC with a horizontal approach like I did, right? Where it's like, I'm actually have experience now in several vertical industries, but my real expertise for me is a horizontal one, which is B2B sales and marketing. And I think similarly, like if you have a really strong horizontal focus and that could be like sales and marketing, finance, it could be operations. I guess those would really be like the main ones, but you could take that kind of approach as well. And I think there's definitely a path into VC for you there. It's just like those roles might look like business development for the fund or investor relations or a platform role where you're supporting the fund, or maybe even like an operating partner role. Like there's obviously so many different types of roles within VC too. So I guess you probably want to get clear on, do you want to be in an investor decision making, like diligence and check writing role, or do you want to be more in like support the portfolio and the fund role? And then that might determine whether you take like that more vertical or more horizontal approach. But I think
I
we're
like
seeing that breakout. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say I like the breakout too, because I think sometimes folks forget that like being a part of a VC fund doesn't mean that you're just underwriting deals or like looking at deals. You could also be like head of product, head of marketing. You could be supporting the community. Like there's a lot of like interesting roles to work at a VC that's not necessarily like you're the number one person like underwriting the deals, which is great. I like that.
And I still wouldn't like underestimate your value, because like even though my expertise is like sales and marketing, I would always bring that lens to diligence, right? Meaning like I was like, oh, well, does this go to market strategy make sense? Like, do their pipeline metrics look good? Like, and I had a better sense of that than some of my like MBA consultant type colleagues, right? So like, yeah, don't underestimate, like all skill sets are valuable. And then it's just finding the fun where your skill set complements the team.
Yeah, I like that. That's good. I kind of tangential to this. I know that you're a angel investor now outside of just being, outside of the investments you did at the VC fund. When you're thinking about investments from like an angel perspective, what are some of the things that you're evaluating? Is it different than when you're at the VC? And then maybe just even like more like current metrics. Like I know for me, raising a pre-seed round right now has been pretty wildly different than if you're raising like 2 years ago. So I maybe just what do you look at as an angel investor? And then two, kind of like, is it slightly different than previous years maybe?
Yeah. I think anytime you're angel investing, it is inherently different, right? Just because like I don't have an investment thesis and investors, like I don't have a fiduciary responsibility to report back to anyone else, right? So I think hopefully everyone understands that. Like some of these funds, they just can't do certain deals because that would, violate their agreement with their own LPs. But so obviously I have kind of free range like any angel does. So I'd say for that reason, in general, I think I'm not unlike a lot of angel investors, and that I think we generally invest in people we know and sectors that we know. But other than that, an angel investment is generally like such an early stage of the company that you really are investing in the person's ability more than like a product. And I know some angel investors that will like really analyze like the TAM and the opportunity and all that. Like candidly, I don't get that prescriptive because the checks I'm writing are like 1 to 10,000. Like this isn't, I don't know. Like again, it's like the check size to me should reflect the level of diligence as well, right? Like if I was writing $100,000 check as an angel, I probably would be doing a lot more technical diligence. But even then, again, these are such early companies that you really just have to believe that the person you're giving the money to is going to be the person that knows what to do with that money to make it a viable business. But yeah, so I think I'm not unlike a lot of people. Like I invest in people I know really well, and then also like ideas that I can personally relate to, or like I feel like I can personally help them outside of my money. Like that's another really important piece for me, is that do I think I have a network or a skill set or something that can help this founder beyond my $10,000? Because if I don't, it's probably honestly like not worth the admin for them to add me to their cap table if I don't have much more to give than my $10,000. So I think like you want to think about that. And then for me personally, like I like to invest in sales and marketing, now that I'm like growing a business where I provide sales and marketing consulting, and I'm like living and breathing that every single day. Like from this point forward, I'm really looking for investments that are in sales and marketing tech, because I'm the end user and I feel like I can be a distributor, a product feedback loop, all of those things. So like that's an area that I'm focused on. And then personally, I like a founder that is displaying evidence of being a thought leader and building community and an audience around them. Like that's a requirement for me as an angel too, because at the beginning stages, like nobody does know who your company is. Your product probably doesn't even work yet. I want to see that someone has the ability to build an audience and a community around them. And if they have those capabilities, I'm confident that when they have a product, they're going to be able to get the product feedback loop that they need fast enough, and they're going to be able to get paying customers and convert that into a pipeline faster. And so like, to me, that's another thing I look for. But those are more like qualitative than quantitative. And then as far as if it was different than years past, like for me, not really, because again, my check sizes are not big enough where like, I think that's different, but I understand why for institutional investors, it's a different story today, because their ability to raise capital from LPs is harder. And so like, it just, the shit rolls downhill or shit rolls uphill, whichever way it goes. Like, like that's just a direct reflection of, of that environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I totally know. It's been a wild time talking to a lot of VCs. They're having a rough year too. So,
Yes.
one of the things I was going to ask you is, so I feel like you had a pretty confident sense when you were ready to make the leap. I wonder if you have any like recommendations for if you were to talk to somebody else around when do you know that it's a good time to start your own company? Like, do you have qualifying metrics or like indicators that like maybe you would be a good founder, maybe the market's right, maybe you're the right, CEO, product market fit? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I would love to know kind of like based on even your own experience, what would be your recommendation?
Yeah. I do think founder market fit is really important. And I think I have that for my business, right? Meaning like I sell sales and marketing services. That's what I'm known for. I sell it to startups. I've been living and breathing startup and VC and building my ecosystem for years. So like for me, that made natural sense, and I think that, and anyway, so I think like founder market fit is really important. And that would be a requirement for me if I were starting a business, or that'd be my advice to everybody. As far as the timing, I think, that is going to vary for each person. But for me, I can just like tell you my thought process. Like I was at a point in my career where I think I could afford to take some risk, right? Like the way I thought about it, I guess, when I was going to go out on my own was, and I'm starting a services business too. So I guess I should preface that, right? Meaning like there's not this heavy investment in building a platform or a technology that I need to sell. I'm just selling Jessica Schultz's brain, which I already have. So like that's a little different. But so in my case, since there wasn't like this heavy investment in startup costs, right? Like my investment was really like build a website, put together a rough idea of like the services I was going to offer and how I was going to price that and approach it. That didn't take that much amount of time. I decided for me anyway, I was like, all right, what's the minimum amount of money that you need to survive? And for me at the time when I did, it was like, okay, $5,000. And that wasn't like I can live high on my horse. It was just like, that is enough to like literally eat and survive with over my head. And I was like, all right, $5,000 a month. And I was like, I'm going to give myself 6 months to see if I can get to at least 10 grand a month in revenue. And if I can, I'm going to keep going. And if I can't, then I'm going to call this a great experiment. And at least I gave it my everything. And I can always go get hired again because like I'm employable. And so I think everyone has to figure out what those numbers and what that time frame is for them. But I think that's important to get clear on is like, what is the minimum amount I need to live on? And like, what is my time limit for myself of like when I need to achieve a certain amount of progress, or it's just time to call it quits. So that was mine. And I think that's important. And then thankfully for me, I did hit my 10 grand a month my first month. And I was like, okay, I'm doing the right thing. Like this is evidence, but at least I had given myself those kind of like preliminary indicators that were going to indicate success to me to keep going.
Yeah. I love all of that. I had very similar metrics. It was like, am I mentally ready? Also, like, am I financially ready? And like, am I the person to be backing this business? And do I like make sense as the face of it? I felt like those were all like a lot of the good benchmarks that I always recommend too. So very, very similar. Kind of going on to the next points, I was wondering, since you've been running your company, maybe what are some of the hardest parts about it? And maybe what are some of the best parts about it? Especially because you're kind of a solo founder and solo business. Wonder if you have like kind of pros and cons to it so far.
Yeah. I think as you can probably attest to it, I think any founder I talk to says this, like, I'm glad I didn't know how hard it was going to be before I did it, because I don't think many of us would do it if we did know. I mean, it will be some of your most, as you know, some of your most challenging, lowest moments of your life at times. And then it will be the best moments of your, like, I don't know, I feel like it's the lowest lows and the highest highs, but at least everything you're doing is for yourself. And I do know for me, and probably for you and for anyone that is even considering entrepreneurship, I think this would always have been an itch I needed to scratch. So I'm glad I'm doing it, right? And thankfully so far it's been successful, and that's great. But I think it would be something that always would be like a what if I didn't just try. And like, what's the worst that happens? Like, it doesn't, like we just said, it doesn't work and I go get a job, or it doesn't work and I try something different. I think like that's just always been my mentality in general, is like, what's the worst that happens? Like, I mean, it's just not that bad. I don't know, in my opinion. I guess like as long as you're like resilient and you're willing to just like pick yourself up and go at it again. So yeah, if you don't have that kind of resilient attitude, I'd say it's not for you. But yeah, it was an itch I needed to scratch. I would say like probably the hardest thing for me personally has been talent. And that's also, again, I think that's probably hard for all founders, like finding the right people. But I think it's even harder when you're running a services business too, because like you are the product. And I always say like people are actually less predictable than software, right? Like many ways. So, that people part has been really hard. But I would say like just what we were talking about before we started this podcast, right? Like the having to learn so many little things that you don't predict. Like you have to be tech support, you have to be HR, you have to be legal. Like I remember I already like made a mistake one time where I used a picture I wasn't supposed to use in a blog, and I got like a cease and desist and like a threatening like lawsuit, like, you know what I mean? Like a lawsuit
No.
threat. Like, I mean, it's just like, you know, and thankfully that's behind me now. And but I'm just saying, like, just the most random things will hit you and you're like, so I don't know, it's hard, but I guess like the long story short is like, I would do it all again. And I think I would be sitting here if I hadn't done it yet, still with an itch.
Yeah.
That helps, but
I totally understand all fronts. Yeah, talent, yeah, being a jack of all trades, it's a lot, but the mostly I love it. So there's probably
yeah.
something in there. Like most founders, probably they're like they constant like having to like relearn a lot of things. I'm going out and learning. I've taken like 4 new courses this year. Like I'm constantly trying to learn too. So it's like staying just like up to date with everything. I don't know. Yeah, it's just like always be learning, which is kind of the thought
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking into it. And
And to
the
your
last
point, like, I guess I love that too. So maybe that is like a requirement as well, starting a company. Like, you have to just love learning.
Yeah. I've tried to turn it into like I actually think it's really fun. I and enjoyable, and this is like what we get to do for work. So yeah, I always try to see it all as like a positive. It's fun.
Yeah.
The last kind of point that I wanted to jump into is just around mentorship. I don't know if you have, they say like, do you have a personal board of directors versus like a professional one? I don't know if you have
Mm.
people like in the workforce that served as mentors or people just kind of in your personal life that you use. I would love to know around like your idea around like mentorship and what kind of role, if any, it plays in your life.
Yeah. I read something. I wish I could remember where I read it to give that person credit, but um, it's probably an idea you've heard of. Like, it's not an uncommon idea, but basically the concept of like always having someone like 2 steps behind you, where you are now, and then where you want to be like in your life. And I think I've just always kept that kind of in my peripheral, if you will. And so like I try to surround myself with at least 1 or 2 people that are 2 steps behind me at my same stage and then like ahead of me. And some of the people ahead of me, I actually don't even know personally, right? But they're like women that have built, in my case, like sales or marketing agencies and have had really successful exits or have really successful personal brands and like public images. And I consume anything and everything of theirs that I can get my hands on, you know, and like thankfully the people ahead of you in most cases will probably have already recorded 10,000 podcast episodes and written a book and like whatever. So like thankfully like a lot of the people that are ahead of us have left a lot of free or publicly available like breadcrumbs for us to consume. So like I have those people in my mind that are kind of like my little, you know, heroes, I guess, that I look up to and I study what they do. And then definitely the people that are like I would consider my peers. You know, I have really strong relationships and I talk to them if not every week, definitely every month. Like, and, you know, get like either get their opinions on a challenge that I'm facing or just even just like, I don't know, bounce ideas off of them. Like, definitely having those people that you can share your ideas, kind of make sure you're not crazy. Like, they're going to check you, they're going to give you the honest feedback. Like, that's super important. But yeah, I think that kind of like 360, like behind where you're at and ahead of you is like really important.
I totally agree. I just started mentoring with Her Workplace. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
No.
Started by Marilyn in New York City, and it's been really great for me. I've always been like a advocate for mentorship. I have like a personal mentor, but for me to actively be mentoring like women that are, both 10 and 15 years younger than me,
Yeah.
really like reminding me of like how eager I was when I first got started and like just remembering like you don't know what you don't know. And I think it's also kind of set in stone for me how far I actually have come. So it is
Yeah.
helpful. I think that's nice to remember like sometimes I feel like I sometimes can be a bit hard on myself when I'm thinking about everything I'm trying to accomplish in the moment. And that's also to your point around like the 360 of like, I've actually built like a really great career. I've done a lot of work and I can be helpful to others. and I still also have a lot to learn. So it's like being able to have
Mm-hmm.
both sides of the coin is really helpful for me.
Yeah, that was such a great way to put it, because you're right. It's like the humility, but the appreciation, like,
Yeah,
yeah, having both sides of that is super helpful.
both sides, yes. I'll maybe we'll end on if you have anything else you wanted to share. I mean, I love, like I said, I love everything that you're working on. I'm a big fan of yours. I know you also have a newsletter, which I love, and you're just so active. So I don't know if there was like anything else you wanted to share, and if anything, just maybe let everybody know where we can find you online.
Yeah. I'm most active on LinkedIn. So you guys will see me there. And then, yeah, to your point, Katie, I run a newsletter. And basically, like, my whole goal is just to help more, like, help sales and marketing seem less daunting, because I know that it's obviously required for every single business to make money. And so people need to know how to make money, and they need to know how to do it faster and scalably as a startup. And so, like, my whole goal is just to make that simpler and more approachable and easier. So, like, yeah, everything with my content is just focused on helping founders learn um and making it not seem so scary.
Yeah.
So hopefully I do that. Check me out for that.
I love it. If folks wanted to work with you, is there a type of company? I know you said your stage of company or anything around the type of company that you like to work with. Just so if people kind of fit that mold, maybe they could reach out.
Yeah. My kind of perfect client, if you will, is a late seed, early series A. I know it's alphabet soup. So, like, roughly 1 million in revenue, where the founder has gotten the company to that point. Like, I really think it's so important for every company to start founder-led sales. But then once you get to around 1 million, there usually starts to be this friction where you can't be the sole producer anymore, and you need to scale beyond yourself. So that founder-led sales transition is really where my passion and my expertise is. So that's where I love to come into companies, is like the founder has gotten it to that point and they know that they need to build a team. And I'd love to come in and help people do that, build the team, the processes, the systems to make it scalable. I only work with B2B companies. I am the ultimate consumer myself, but I do not know much about consumer marketing. And then naturally, because of my background, I've worked with a lot of companies in fintech, healthcare, and HR. But really, if you're a B2B product, I'm, happy to chat and happy to learn.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Jess. It's always a wealth of knowledge to connect with you. So you're the best, and can't wait to see you
Thank you
again
for having
soon.
me.